Those of you who don't know me, I am Rick Goche. I am the owner of Aquatic Resources that builds aquafusers. I'm also the owner of the fishing vessel Peso 2 that you see products coming through for. A little bit about my history. I've been in and around the seafood industry from research to retail for about 50 years. I caught my first commercial fish when I was 13 years old, and I'm 69, so you can do the math. In 1983, I started working with live crab from a shipping perspective instead of a crabbing perspective. I had customers down in San Francisco who wanted me to get live crab down to them with all of them live. Until that point, live crab industry was basically, bucket dumped crabs, shipped dry, unrefrigerated, to places like San Francisco and LA, where people who wanted live crabs, mainly the Asian community at that time, in fact exclusively, would pick through the whole truckload of crabs and come up with a few crabs that were good enough to make it for a few days live in their really crappy tanks at the time. Everything's changed, as you probably recognize. It was a long, hard-fought battle because fishermen wanted to do what fishermen had always done, which was, move them fast. We don't care about legs. We don't care about dead crabs. We care about getting them off the boat and get back out to catch more crabs. So one of the things that I learned as I was pioneering that whole effort towards live crab for live resale was that you had to have enough oxygen in the water to keep the crabs not just alive, but healthy enough to be alive and in good shape for your customer, because that is the supply chain that had to happen. So went through a whole bunch of iterations of different ways of oxygenating water, and this is what I found to be the best. It's not the cheapest, but it's not the most expensive. It is the most durable, with the exception of the worst thing that you can do, which is just take hose and drill holes in it. That is literally the worst thing you can do for aerating crab. Crabs cannot breathe bubbles. They only breathe dissolved oxygen. The way you dissolve oxygen is you maximize the surface area of the air that is in contact with the water. In other words, the bubble. So if you put a cubic foot of air through water, the smaller the bubble, the greater the surface area that can contact the water. If you put a big bubble, just a 1 foot bubble, there's not much surface area to it. But if you break that into 10 million bubbles per cubic foot, lots and lots of surface area. The second thing is, in order for that oxygen to be transmitted from the bubble into the water as dissolved oxygen, it has to have contact time. So you have to have a deep enough container of water and crabs so that the bubble has enough time traveling up through the water column to transmit the oxygen from the bubble into the water. So you can't put this on the top of the water and expect anything good to happen. You have to put it at the lowest point in the tank or the boat, whatever your container is.
Explain a little bit, I guess, maybe on a lot of people's belief. I think we still have recreational crabbers that want to circulate water. You know, I mean, and I think that's originally what crabbers did for years and years and years, was just circulate water. So I guess.
Okay, so circulating water, or recirculating water.
There you go.
That's what you're really.
Yes.
So recirculating water has drawbacks. One is it takes energy to move the water with the pump, and that energy, some of that energy is expended in heat. So as the water, even though you can't maybe feel it by just touching it, every time the water goes through the pump, the temperature goes up. So over time, you have a higher and higher temperature. One thing that is important to remember is that the lower the temperature, the greater the capacity of the water for dissolving oxygen and holding it dissolved. So the higher the temperature, the less likely you are to have dissolved oxygen in the water. So you want to keep the temperature as low as you can get, down to a maximum low temperature of 28 degrees. You don't want to go below 28 degrees. That's where seawater freezes, and then you have all kinds of problems. But just recirculating water, absent all other good things happening to that water, if you are recirculating the water for a short period of time and splashing the water, so therefore exposing lots of the surface of the water to air, like dropping the water from the outlet of the pump into the surface of the water, that can add some oxygen, but nothing as efficient as aeration at the bottom of your water column. Another thing that's important to remember in holding live crabs is salinity. So fishermen have learned over the decades that if their port of call is a river, which almost all of them are, and there's been a lot of rain, the fresh water coming out that river is enough to kill their crabs. So they'll shut down and either pump off or recirculate or shut down and aerate outside of the river flume, outside of the area where the fresh water comes out and spreads out along the coast.
Aquafuser set up on the bottom. I've noticed that some they still pump out recirculate water on top of using Aquafuser hoses. What's the advantage to that?
Pump out and recirculate.
Well, get rid of the water, get new water.
Oh, absolutely. So that's getting into ammonia.
Okay.
So as crabs breathe, they metabolize the food that's in their gut, and all of their metabolic processes creates ammonia. Just like when we urinate out the ammonia through all the filters of our systems to get rid of the toxins. Same with crabs. They don't urinate, they actually breathe out the ammonia, but it's still in the water. And ammonia is measured in parts per million. So it's really small amounts. You can't smell it, you can't see it, but it's there and it's deadly. So the reason that crabbers will pump out the water sometimes even every high tide being when the salinity is the greatest, is to change out the water so that they flush out all of the metabolic byproducts of the crabs in the water, put in new water, and start all over again with good salinity and nothing but the background of ammonia. When I say background of ammonia, pretty much every place has a tiny bit of a background of ammonia because there are creatures living in there. But the background isn't enough to hurt the crabs.
Does the ammonia suspend within the water column, or does it settle toward the bottom of the tank?
If you had dead water, no circulation at all, it would lay down with the crabs.
Gotcha.
But even when you aren't recirculating water and you're using air, and you have these at the bottom, your air source at the bottom of the water column, as low as you can get, the action of the bubbles rising creates an airlift. You've all seen aquariums where they have the little tube in the corner and they got the bubbles coming up. Well, that is not just aerating the water and oxygenating water. It's also, if you looked underneath, it's also pulling water from the water column down through the gravel and through a filter system, and then up with the bubbles it's also coming water, and you see the water coming out the little overflow thing, right, in an aquarium. Same thing as the water lift that we create with an aquafuser. The bubbles going up pull water in from the sides and up like that. So
Creates a back.
it creates an airlift. So what you want to do when you're placing these is put them as low as you can get, close to the center line of the boat as you can get, no more than 1.5 feet apart, and that creates that center airlift in the boat or in the tote or whatever, so that it's circulating everything. So you don't get those dead spots where the ammonia can sit and concentrate and kill the crabs. Everybody that's crab knows that when you get dead spots, you get dead crabs. If you get a place where there is no circulation or not enough circulation to carry away the metabolic byproducts of the crabs and dilute it into the rest of the water, you get one dead crab, you get a bunch of dead crab. The longer it's there, the bigger that dead spot, the more dead crabs you get. So let's talk about system sizing. So the tendency of people, not just fishermen or crabbers, is to want to just copy someone else. It's like plagiarism. You know, when you're in school and you're writing a paper, the easiest way to do it is copy someone else's, whether it was the person beside you or out of a book or off the internet. But that doesn't always work. So plagiarizing someone's live system in a boat, for example, which is mostly what we work with at Inland Marines, is problematic in the respect that almost every boat is different. And there are fundamental processes and fundamental fundamentals of physics that have to be applied when you properly size a live air system. So some of the things that are helpful to remember. I already talked about putting things towards the center line and not too far apart, so that you create that center up, pulling in from the sides airlift to make sure that you don't have dead spots. Oh, something else about that. Lots of holds have a rake in the stern. In other words, it's deeper in the center of the hold or the forward part of the hold than it is at the stern of the hold, because of, you've seen boats out of the water, they tend to be deepest in the middle, and then as you get towards the rudder and towards the propeller, the bottom curves up. So we need to remember that air takes the path of least resistance. Resistance in this case is the weight of the water above your air diffuser, your aquafuser. So if you have an aquafuser that, let's say this is the full length of the boat, of the hold, that goes from here and follows the rake of the stern like this, where's all the air going to come out? Here. Little or nothing is going to come out here, depending on how much air, how much pressure, the rake of the hold, etc., etc. But there's going to be a shitload more come out here than here. So what's that going to do to your airlift and your circulation? It's not going to be good, that's for sure. So it's better to count on the airlift to bring water in from the stern and the sides than it is to have one end of the diffuser higher than the other. A couple inches is not going to make a big difference. A couple feet absolutely will. So that's something to remember. To size an air pump, you should size the air pump to provide half of a CFM per foot of diffuser. You may not use all that, but that's where you should start. So how you figure out how much you need is you need to remember that every 27.7 inches of water depth equals 1 PSI. So if you got a 54-inch deep tank, how many PSI you have there? 2. Correct. Then you have to add 20 inches of water to that formula. So if you've got 52 inches or 54 inches of water, if you're using an aquafuser, you need to add 20 inches to that depth, because the back pressure of the aquafuser is 20 inches, the equivalent of 20 inches of water. So now you got 74 inches. So that's rounding it up. You got three PSI that is required to put air through this aquafuser. So what I do is I ask the fisherman, how many pounds of crabs do you want to hold live? And I don't ask how many pounds of crab the hold packs, because that is seldom how many pounds of crabs they want to hold live. Most boats are just selling to the cooked market at the beginning of the season. That's slowly changing, but also lots of boats don't stay out until they're completely packed with crabs. So the question is, how many pounds of crabs do you want to hold live? Not how many pounds of crabs does the boat pack? Then you take that number of pounds and you divide that by 270 pounds. And that tells you how many feet you need to have an aquafuser in the boat, because each foot, with the proper amount of air, each foot can sustain 270 pounds of crabs. So you do that math, and so the example here is 1 foot of aquafuser properly supplied with air can provide enough dissolved oxygen to maintain 270 pounds of crabs. So 270 pounds of crabs per foot. So if you've got 5,000 pounds that you're trying to hold live, and you got a 72 inches, 6 foot deep hold, then you add 20 inches of back pressure. So you got 72 plus 20, now you got 92. Divide that by 27.7 inches equals 3.3 psi of head. So if you take 5,000 pounds divided by 270, you need 18.5 feet of aquafuser with 9.25 CFM. It's pretty simple math once you get those fundamental formula knowns down. Then you just plug in your unknown and run the math. Whether you have an operation that has half a dozen totes on deck with water and aquafusers in the bottom, or you have an operation that is a fish hold that requires 25 aquafusers in order to provide enough air for the pounds of crabs you're holding. Obviously, you can't do it all in one.
If you wanted to
one run. So you have to create a manifold. And what's a manifold do? A manifold separates out the incoming volume, whether it's an exhaust manifold or an intake manifold on a carburetor or an engine or whatever. You're taking a total volume and separating it out into equal volumes. So with a boat, what we do is we calculate the total amount of air required for the amount of pounds of crabs that the guy wants to hold. And then we take the length of the boat minus the rise at the stern, and we divide that out. I usually try to go with 4. Depends on how much it is. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4. For some reason, it always ends up an even number, very seldom 3. What you do is you bring all of the air from your air source, whether it's 1 air pump or 2 air pumps or 4 air pumps, you bring it all into a common place, and then you separate it. Now, sometimes guys will want to have 2 air pumps, which is always a good idea to have something for backup, and bring them into 2 runs. So you have a split manifold. So you have one air source coming down to a split that goes to two equally length diffuser runs. So imagine your pump is up here, and you come down, and you come to your hold, and you are wanting to have 4 runs. So you try to keep everything even, like that. You don't want to have one that's longer or loops back than the other, because it's going to try to take the rest of all of more air than the other ones. So you try to keep those all of equal length.
So I guess if you to put that in your mindset, if you had a 1-air pump system and you've got 4 different length runs, you obviously the longer leg's going to get the higher percentage of air than the next one down, next one down, next one down. So then you're creating a potential place for imbalance. That's exactly. So
you come out with capacity, like capacity of your air pump.
Yeah,
At some point, that's
you
probably expensive.
could overcome it with capacity, but now you're just wasting money.
But on your split, or your
Manifold.
they want to run 2 pumps. The variance of the pumps, I mean, is that something
I don't recommend running different kinds of pumps.
just exact replicas?
Exactly the same make and model and performance curve. The reason being is if you want to have a spare, on the boat, yep, that same exact one.
The one.
If you have a pump go down, you can always just use that one pump, and you can have parts. If you have identical pumps, you can have parts to repair the same pump. You don't have to have 2 sets of parts and 2 different pumps and 2 different suppliers, etc., etc. It's always simpler, and I always recommend, even with the warranties or the advertising of a pump saying, oh, it's a 10-year pump, it's always good to have a spare.
absolutely. So the other thing too, when if you get fishermen coming in and they're saying that we're setting up a system or we're plumbing this stuff, just for your guys' information, our red general purpose hose is the hose to use. That is an air hose that is rated for all the PSI. This is very low pressure, but
For the intake.
that's right. Well, for all the air distribution. So the other thing too is you got to remember this is going to be down in a hold. So if a guy's looking at putting in clear PVC or even reinforced PVC, probably not the best idea if you're going to be putting crabs and things on top of some of this, and so just remember the red general purpose air hose is the way to go.
What's the PSI rating?
300.
Exactly. So we're only running a few PSI, right? So why do we need 300 PSI hose? We just get by with that clear stuff that aquariums use. Wrong. Take a piece of the clear hose and pinch it with your fingers and see what happens. Take a piece of the 300 PSI red hose and pinch it. You can't. So it's not about the pressure inside, it's the pressure outside. So you got a piece of that hose that's going around corners, and your pumps may be up on the bridge, right? And so the red hose is coming around corners and down into the hold, and then it gets down into the hold. When you pump out the crabs, there's tons of crabs on that hose. What's going to happen to that hose if it's that thin, clear plastic stuff? Nothing good.
How do these fishermen, let's just use fishermen, but how do you test this system? Say, before crab season starts, you've got an aquafuser system already in your boat, so you've had it for X amount of years. How do you make sure that that's still working and working properly? I guess, when do you know it's time to replace it?
Good question. So it's always good to keep these clean. Yeah, the way that these are designed is so that you can daisy chain them. I'm getting to your cleaning part. I want to show this first. So you can put them together. Afraid I'm going to break your glass here if I swing that into it. This is how you make any length that you need in each run. And then you simply just put the cap back on and move the barb fitting to the other end. Now you've got
Is there a maximum length that you recommend on those at all?
No, there's no maximum length. You just have to
Increase the pressure coming from the pump?
exactly adjust the design of the air source to fit that length.
As long as that's fairly level, you're gonna get equal through.
Correct. Correct. So in order to clean, did you come up with the fitting?
No, I think Mills bought them all the other day.
Oh, okay. So the best way to do this is to use a double female and back flush. So normally the air comes from the brass end, the barbed end, and to the cap. But the best way, and it's not absolutely the only way, but the best way to clean these is to back flush them through the cap end. So you put a double female garden hose fitting on there, and then your garden hose just from the house pressure into here, and then plug this just with your thumb, and then shake it. I don't want to do it here because I'll break your glass.
Right.
But shake it so that it's working the inside of the media that's in here and breaking up any concentrations of silt and crab shit and whatever else gets sucked in here. when you put this system in and you're getting ready to go fishing, as soon as you put the water in, start putting the water in, you turn the air on. And you don't turn it off until after all of the crabs are out of the boat and you're done. And the reason is, even if there's a little bit of water in the bottom and you turn the air pressure off, it's going to want to try to siphon. And the air coming out sucks water in, and now water in the bottom of the boat is full of all kinds of nastiness. So leave the air going until you're completely pumped out and the unload is done. And then, at the end of the season, you want to take these out and flush them, back flush them, and then only with garden hose pressure. You want to wash them off, and if you have any doubt that they're not all the way clean, put them in a tote of water and put them away for the summer until next season, because that'll keep whatever is left in there soft, and it'll be much easier to clean out when you go to put things back together. How do you test the system? So you've got everything sized, you've talked to someone, me or England Marine staff, and they've sized your system and everything is as it should be. So you put 2 feet of water in your hold, or whatever it takes to completely cover your diffusers, and then you put on your waders and you go down in there and you look. And you look along the runs for any big bubbling areas. Like sometimes people will not get these tight enough, and all that's keeping big bubbles from coming out is that little red gasket, right? Well, if you don't have that little red gasket compressed enough, it will leak bubbles, and instead of the air takes the path of least resistance. It will take the path of least resistance there and come out. You don't want to over tighten it. You don't want to try to use a wrench or pliers to tighten that gasket though. Hand tight is good enough. Just make sure it is hand tight. As a fisherman, your customer is the buyer, the place where you unload. Your customer has a customer, and that customer has a customer. And there's a lot of time and handling between coming off the boat and getting to your customer's customer's customer. It has to, for live crab, it has to be still alive and healthy enough for the consumer, which is your customer's 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 customer, to see something in their tank and say, oh, that's a lively looking crab, I want that one. And that's what keeps the price up. You know, when I first started doing this, you know, we were selling crabs for under $1 a pound, a lot, for years. And it wasn't until the live market became what it is now that we saw prices over $2.50 a pound. Now everybody's pissed off when it's not 5. Well, the only reason it ever got to 5 was because of the live market.
Now, most of this live market, is that in the States or is that out of states? Or is that over Asia, over in that area? So I guess the shelf life on these Aquafuser houses, because we'd be at like, I remember when we were last, it was 3 weeks. We could have crab on the boat for 3 weeks. So how long after that 3 weeks can these hoses and proper care keep those crab alive?
Yeah, so to your first question, it depends. Where the market is depends on the price and so many different things. There's a growing demand in the live market in the U.S., and there are more and more people who are getting the ability to airship live crab. When I sold my live crab business, I was shipping to 3 countries and 27 states, all by air. I don't think there's anybody doing that anymore. I'm guessing because China has pretty much cornered the market, one, and the awareness and the desire for locally sourced seafood is becoming bigger and bigger. So there's more demand locally for live crab, plus there is more demand in Asia for live crab. Most of the live crab that I know about anyway goes from U.S. buyers to Canadian buyers, and because Vancouver has direct flights to China. We don't have West Coast direct flights to China. So there's another customer in that supply chain that needs to be supplied high quality product. As far as how long you can keep the crabs, that also depends. So if you take crab that's been in the pot for 2 weeks, because of weather and whatever, that crab has mainly been off feed for that 2 weeks. And because of it's probably a weather caused delay in turning that gear, it's been banged around in not very good conditions. I call them storm crabs. They just don't hold up as well as crabs that are in gear that's turned more frequently in better weather. So it depends.
Yeah.
How long?
Big variable.
The condition of the crab is everything. And that's why when I'm designing systems for shore-based customers, I frequently talk about not being able to turn a sow's ear into a silk purse. It all depends on the quality of the crab that you put in the system. You can have the perfect system, everything exactly right, and the water quality exactly the way it's supposed to be. If you put shit crabs in, they're going to die. That's just all there is to it. If you put good crabs in, a perfect system like that, you're going to get a lot longer shelf life and a lot lower mortality with that system. But you got to put good crabs in to start with, and this is one way that you make sure you get good crabs to start with is look at the boat. I tell the customers that are wanting me to design them a live system is look at the boat. If they're using a good air system that's properly designed and the crab coming off that boat look right and look good, then they're probably going to be good. When you're sizing a system and you're interviewing the fishermen about their fish hold, you always want to be clear that you need the depth from the bottom of the boat, the hole, to the surface of the water in inches and accurate. So if they've got a flush deck hatch and the water just runs out underneath the deck grates, that is the top of the hold. If they've got a combing, even though it's only this big and the water runs over the top, that's the depth of the hold. Not the from the bottom of the hold to the underside of the deck. The top of the water. That's the depth that you need to know in inches. So if you got a 50-inch hold from the bottom of the boat, the bottom of the hole to the top of the water is 50 inches, and you add what? 20. Now you have 70 inches, and then you divide 70 by what?
0.7.
Correct. Which gives you a result, and you divide that by feet, and that tells you how many feet you need. So I've had many guys ask me whether they're just curious about how to make their boat the best they can get it, or people are designing a boat to build new. You know, what's the best, absolute best live crab system? The absolute best live crab system is chilled seawater.
Yeah, it's just kind of going to talk about it.
Circulated in the hold with aquafusers properly sized and multiple runs, and no more than 2 runs per pump, so multiple pumps with a spare pump, all identical, and replacement parts in the engine room, ready to rebuild a pump.
What's the premium amount of runs?
What's that?
What's the premium amount of runs that are
The absolutely best way to do it is 1 pump, one run. You know, but
just multiple?
yeah, that takes out every kind of variation, and but it's a lot of pumps to have sometimes.
When we used to sell live crab, we pump them down with that, or we ice them.
Mm-hmm.
And was that only because I knew it would calm them down, so like they're not beating each other up. But is there another advantage, like you said, chilled seawater, for the live market?
You know, the reason, so you would ice them down as you were unloading.
Yeah.
So
kind of make them go dormant.
Right.
It's easier to unload them.
I think it's harder to unload them. Yeah, because for live, like they need it, but like when you're unloading for the cook market, they're grabbing each other. It makes it 5 times easier.
Oh yeah, you gotta walk.
grab 15.
Right.
So, but the dormant thing, I think they don't want them pinching each other's legs off, and they don't want them moving around. They want them dormant. So when you say customer gets them, they're intact, they're full.
Exactly.
You don't want to go to Red Lobster and get a lobster that doesn't have a pincher.
Well, not only that, but crabs bleed,
I didn't know
and
that.
they can bleed to death.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, you've seen sometimes that kind of a greenish bluish color coming out of a crab pinch hole. That's actually crab blood. Crabs, we have hemoglobin. It's iron-based blood. So ours is red. Our blood is red from that iron. The crabs have hemocyanin, which is copper-based blood. That's why you never want to use copper any place in the circulating system for a crab boat because you make an imbalance in the copper in the water and you kill the crabs. I don't know all the science behind it, but I know for a fact it works because I've done it.
Yeah.
I killed a lot of crabs trying to figure out all this shit.
So, well, while we're on that, while you're building these manifold systems and stuff, if you're using some of our bronze valves, or, I mean, there's a certain amount of copper within those valves, but it's,
That's not going to hurt you.
okay,
Not enough.
All right.
copper.
okay,
I was about to ask the same question.
yeah.
So the idea of chilling the crabs down as you're unloading is instead of, grabbing them by the armload,
Yeah.
you're handling them one at a time. You don't want them pinching because they'll bleed to death from those pinches. Even if they don't tear a leg off, they can still bleed to death. In fact, as far as the crab living, it's better if the appendage is gone because they have a little valve at the body that closes up and keeps them from bleeding to death. But if you have a pinch in the leg,
Yeah.
it's not enough to throw the leg and close that valve so they can bleed to death through that
You're
pinch.
saying if you see a crack in the leg, you might as well.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it would
It's
be better for
probably a
the,
goner anyway.
right.
You very seldom see a live crab, 5 hours after unloading that has a pinch. You're already dead.
You know something? Fun fact,
Yeah.
right?
Weird little bugs, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Got little shut-off valves in their legs.
Yeah, well, I mean, you always wonder, because, I mean, hell, it
Yeah.
makes sense.
It does. Well, I never knew crab's bloods. I never even wondered.
Wow.
Because it's got a crack, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
it's fine. But
Any other
Good stuff.
questions?
So is a crab like, so if you have a hole in the crab leg or whatever, the venture, can you put it back? Does the water, like us, it just heals up over time, but they do not heal up over time or not?
Every once in a while, you'll see a injured crab that didn't throw its leg heel up. Generally, you see a crab with a missing leg that's healed up instead of a wound that's healed.
Interesting, yeah. Wow.
So often there's before they get in a crab fight or ever like gets cracked, they throw the leg.
Yeah, they can. There's a reaction in them that they can pop that leg off. In fact, when a crab is stressed, and depending on the severity of the stress, they will throw legs to concentrate all of their energy to the body. So that's why if you take a really lively crab and throw it into boiling water, they'll throw half or all of their legs many times. That's why when they're cooking crabs, they tend to wait until the crab's almost dead before they put them in the cooker, so they don't throw all their legs off from the shock of the heat.
Is there chance of over oxygen? Can you put too much oxygen in the water?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. You can put too much air in the water. You can put too much water in the water, too much flow in the water. So you pull the back off of a crab and you see those little feather kind of things above their gills? Those are their pump. That's how they pump the water from the back, from the little two holes on either side of the flap, out through, across the gills, and out their mouth. You've seen, crowds with water coming out of their mouth. They're just sitting there. So their pump are those little feather things. you can imagine they're not very efficient. So if you've got velocity of water or air that is greater than what those little feathery things can overcome, they're going to not be able to bring fresh oxygenated water in. They use up all of their gills use up all the oxygen in their sinus cavity, and they die. So, good question. That's the right question.
That's a great idea to have someone help you size your system.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen guys put in new pumps, and more is better. So way more is way better. With water, and then they end up with all the crabs alongside the pipe.
Oh yeah.
Dead, because the velocity of the water is so great the crabs can't sustain themselves. Plus, crabs have a finite amount of energy, just like everybody else. So if you take especially a storm crab, and you put them in a situation where the velocity of the water is really high, so they're having to constantly be moving to stay in place and swimming, they'll just wear themselves out and die.
Yeah. Wow. So you really got to strike a balance between the water temperature, the water volume that you're moving or circulating in your air, and then obviously keep the salinity, in check, and that's
And keep the ammonia down.
right.
Can kill a crab fastest, lack of oxygen. So dissolved oxygen is the main, most important thing, is it can kill crab fastest. Ammonia is the second, because it can kill crabs the next fastest. Salinity is the next, because it can kill crabs, but it takes longer. Crabs are an intertidal creature. They can live intertidally, so they're used to having low salinity at low tide and higher salinity at higher tide. So they have ability to kind of balance that stuff out if they get good salinity eventually, to replenish their systems and let them purge.